Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to be here to have a presentation of an innovative process of machine learning. So first of all, let me give you some background of ourselves. So my first name is Kaili, but my last name is not Jenner. So remember that. And I've been to a lending business for about 7 years, and I actually been responsible for subprime lending a lot and near prime. And this is a very interesting industry and also very profitable. And my current job right now is not selling the phone, but actually there is a specific niche market for telco finance. Think about a buy out, pay later product. It's more like that. So why I'm very interested about the machine learning, because I'm always learning new things, and it's very exciting to propel me forward. And let me introduce Michael, who spent like 25 years in the industry.
All right, thank you, Kaili. Nice to be here with all of you. My name is Michael Kortering. I'm the Chief Credit Officer at Reprise Financial, and I have been in the industry for a while across multiple different organizations, JP Morgan Chase, PNC Bank, One Main, which is where Kaili and I used to work across multiple products, and so I've been doing this type of thing for some time. They didn't used to call us data scientists, but they used to call us modelers, but back in the day. But anyway, I'm glad to be here, so thank you.
So let me introduce like what exactly happening in this industry to give a little bit of background, because not many people are actually working in this background. So there are three pillars that we usually focusing on and which the machine learning really makes the impact. The first one is the credit underwriting. Our goal is actually to get more customer to get the loan, but at the same time to control the risk. The risk is that you won't let the customer to be default. But machine learning, me and Michael has an amazing experience in here because we witness how the machine learning has been transformed. Through machine learning, the impact is that we can reduce our loss by 25% to 30%, which is millions of dollars here saved by the company. And the second is more about like marketing is in general. We like to attract our more customer in. And the third one would be our fraud detection. I think some of them may be covered in this similar topics. But I can tell you the most challenging here, especially from a legal and compliance issue, is that, and also our bread and butter is the credit underwriting. This is the most challenging thing that we work through, and Michael actually make a breakthrough in this and challenged the CEO about the new methods. So the thing is that my topic is about like why we have to think differently, because this industry is so developed for 20 years, and they always have their own methods that is in really good use. Think about a normal weighted of evidence fit into a logistic regression, because it can show a clear trend about the correlation and the trend of interpretation between the y-x the correlation between the y and x is a very clear trend. But most of the machine learning methods that we don't have explanation, so that's one of another challenge that we have. So that's why I really like to share with you the process, how we actually get through all each step. The first step is that we like to how we define our business problem and how we actually translate the business problem into a quantitative representation. I think this part is the most interesting part because you can find out new opportunities in here. And the third part is the modeling process. And the fourth part, I think Michael is very specialized in, is about how to sell your model. So let's begin of how we should do about it. I know a lot of people, this forum is about like machine learning and things like that, but most of the time, do you know that why we have to use it? Is there any other way that is like more straightforward or more easier to do it? So because most of the people that I see, especially for junior data scientists, they will usually, I learn something fancy, and then I have to fit the model into the business problem. But in the reality that with more and more experience that I gather, I feel like we have to study the business problem in depth first, and pick out the best solution from the machine learning, because it works really well, because at the first you can sell your model with the stakeholders, the business people who usually don't have the knowledge of machine learning. And the second is that it can actually bring out a great business impact on this one. So ask yourself, first question, why? And let me do an exercise with everybody together. So if you're serve as a consultant in a company, and you have to work with three companies, and I will break down into like 4 dimensions. And my question is like, which company would have the most success rate of deploying a machine learning solution right now? So let me walk through a little bit of here. Company A, they would have a very good quality of data, and they will also have a standardized business. By standardized, I mean that it's the least human judgment involved in this process. The third one is about the tech stack. It's well developed means that the system can handle millions of tests, A/B testing into the platform and make that work. And regulation, I think it's very close to our credit space because we usually have to write hundreds of pages to it. So company A is, everything seems to be very good. An example for applying and machine learning. But company B is opposite, quite the opposite, because I will give you an example. In T-Mobile, we have T-Mobile for Business. You know that lending out the satellite phones can be very expensive for the big corporations. We usually will underwrite them into, underwrite them. But the point is that is very different from the consumer base, and it can be purely digital. They evolve into a lot of human interaction there to see, okay, so what is the quality of this company? What are your financial statements? And what are your banking checking accounts there? So this one, actually, if you like to do it with the machine learning, you can, but be aware that there is a lacking of predicting power there because there won't be a lot of sample data size. Company C is actually the company I work with. It's OneMain Financial. I think a lot of, the ideal situation would be company A because it's more of like a representation of a tech company or a startup because you can build everything from the ground. But company C is representing more like a traditional industry like healthcare or something like that because they usually have a lot of legacy system in there. But how you can implement your machine learning, very advanced, that doesn't fit for the legacy system, you need a way to work around and to be creative about it. So this is one point I really like to highlight, like what is the consideration of doing machine learning. The second example I would like to give out is that I would like to highlight the business model and the business process. If you think about like someone that is talking to you, I would like to build a model for fraud, but I don't know whether it is possible for that. So how did you think about this problem if you have 3 business coming in your company? One is the business is the personal loan with branches. So the people who underwrite them, they go to the branches and do income verification is face-to-face. Then you notice that 1,000 level data is, because it's face-to-face, is usually in nature, it has lesser level data in there. And the second one is the credit card business. And it's high transactional, high volume, and even daily. So it's relatively have higher level data for 3,000. And the third example is about fintech personal loans. Because this business model is purely online, it is usually, because you cannot be face-to-face, you usually will have more examples for that. So why is it so important? Because from our heuristic research, if you really like to build a model that has a decent power of ranking, you really need over 4,000 level data. Because in our industry, right now, supervised learning is so dominating, so the level data is actually very precious. I really want to highlight in this point is that look at your business process very carefully, whether we can leverage that. So I will let Michael to make a summary on that.
Okay, great, thank you, Kaili. So the question is, when should you use a machine learning model, or should you use like a more advanced technique? And as Kaili mentioned, it's not all the case. In my own company, we've had a couple of cases recently where we went with something that's very simple for multiple reasons. It might be faster to deploy. It might be we need speed to market, and it might be the fact that we just simply don't have enough data to do it. But if you can, a machine learning model is generally significantly more powerful. And so if you have the time and if you don't have to worry about regulatory considerations, there'd be a reason for doing that. So if you have lots of data and lots of attributes and regulatory concerns don't exist, then a machine learning model would be good. A classic example of that would be, for example, a direct mail campaign. So if you are trying to send a direct mail campaign, you want to know who's likely to respond or not. You have lots of data, millions of records. It's a great solution. Another case that might be sort of borderline would be a credit model. That generally works well as long as you have enough customers. So if you have small loans, a lot of them, it's good. It works well. Commercial loans, probably not, because you don't have enough volume to make a good loan. So there's sort of both a technology, a science aspect to it, as well as sort of an artistic side to where to deploy what methodology.
So thank you for the summary. So now the next step is that about, I think this is the most interesting part. Why is that? Because if you have to study the problem in depth, you will find new opportunities. That's very exciting in this process. I know a lot of people just talking about how I build a faster model, more accuracy. Yes, that's also important. But if you think about it, this step would directly have business impact on your money wise. So I will share with you what I think is the four most important steps in here from my experience in this industry. So the first thing is that I know we are not Steve Jobs. We cannot create iPhones from scratch because he discovered the need from the people. But in our industry, is that usually it's just a stakeholder come to us and say hey, we have such need of something. Please help us to prioritize to the targeting or something like that. So talk to them at first to see that what exactly they need is super, super important, because it just convinces them and loop them up, and later on they will be more convinced about your model. Just don't sell it later, sell it first. And the second thing is that you have to have an artistic part and also a quantitative ability to translate question framing into a very good target to build, and then to satisfy all the stakeholders and at the same time meet all the goals that actually balance out the expectation that you have. And the third thing is that I feel like if you work into this industry long enough, you are not only focusing yourself or your team, you also have to take a look at the higher level, how your team is actually affecting another team's business and how it's impacting the overall goals of your business. And I think that's also very important. The final thing is that don't expect you to build a model, just wash your hands off, because you will find some more interesting things later. So I will use, so this is the first part that Michael will talk about. There are some tips how to talk to the stakeholders, because I remember there is a previous presentation that people would have some frustrations on how to talk to them, and I think Michael can give out some suggestion.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kaili. So the first thing, as Kaili mentioned at the beginning, is to understand who the stakeholders are and what they're trying to achieve. So my recommendation is to try to think about it from their perspective and try to understand what exactly what their problems are, and then how you can help solve them, as opposed to the opposite, as Kaili mentioned, where you come to them with some cool new idea or new algorithm that you've created, and how can you sell that to them for something that may not be relevant. Also, business owners probably don't have any idea what you're talking about when you're talking. So if you talk to your business owner, like I've heard in this particular forum, they're going to look at you. They probably won't say anything. That's been my experience. So, because I've heard like data scientists do that. They'll talk to a senior executive, and the senior executive will like look and just like not say anything because he or she doesn't want to look like they don't understand. But they probably won't ask any questions, and they probably will just like sort of like let it go because they don't want to look stupid. But they're very smart. They just don't have the special technical expertise that you do in this field. So if you're explaining to them how a model works, my recommendation is to do it in very simplistic terms. Pretend that you're explaining it to somebody who like a high schooler. Not that they're stupid, just that they don't have the same background that you do. Also understand that if this model doesn't work, and if you deploy it against their entire business, bad things happen. And that's what they're going to be thinking about. They're not going to understand it. They're going to know of cases where someone's relied upon a model, they don't understand what you're talking about, and if they trust you and it goes wrong, they're the ones on the hook, not you. So to combat that, I would suggest explain in simple terms what you're trying to do. Get advice from others on how to sell it. And perhaps most important, there was a question about, as someone asked in an earlier forum, what would you do to sort of sell it to a senior management? My suggestion is a four-letter word: test. Suggest a test. Almost no one ever declines a test. I want to do a test on some insignificant population to your business. It's not going to matter. If it doesn't work, no one cares. And then use that results of that test to then make an argument for why you should deploy it along a broader population. Works every time, almost every time. They'll sort of just say it just to get you out of their office or something, but it generally works. And when they see the results, they'll understand that the benefit it'll bring to the company.
Thanks, Michael, for the tips about how to talk to the stakeholders. And next one, I will show you how actually we are tackling a case for marketing response model. Marketing has been running a long, long time in our industry to attract customers. There are so many channels right now. Calling, texting, and email is very effective. In the industry, like us, branding traditional and innovative at the same time, we use telemarketing. I know it's our own methods, but the result is really good. The conversion rate of the telemarketing to convert alone actually is 3 times better than using texting or email. So that's why we still really want to allocated resources about it. But another point is that the calling actually is very expensive. So the strategy team just come to us and saying that, okay, so could you just bring as many loans as possible, and while at the same time to reduce the cost per call. So that's why we get the task. But in the strategy, what they will usually conducting is that they have to prove that calling would be effective. So they will first to do an A/B testing on the population, and the control group would be like no call and no any treatment, and the test group would be like you only doing the calling. But look at the chart that's showing on the left side, because first of all, we are really focusing on the response rate. If you look at the user group 1 and user group 2, and we think that, okay, from a prioritization perspective, if we really want a model, we should focusing on the 4% response rate because it's much higher than the user group A. So that's why we first generating the problem statement and build the models. So let me show you the exact step of how we are going to do. So if you have a problem like in communication with the business team, you can usually breaking down into 2 goals. And one goal is actually specializing using for communication with the strategy team, and you both agree on. And the second thing is more technical goal. You do some translation on your modeling, and then you know that is a binary target for if you get called, what is the probability to get a loan. And the second part is about like how you translate it. And it doesn't have to be like this quantitative. Just lay out a sheet for yourself. Ask for yourself like, what is the goal here? What are you going to minimize or maximize? Is there any constraints on the business side, like whether there's a budget or whether there is a return on investment. But also a very interesting thing is that think other elements too, such as the data issues, because some of the attributes in our industry are FCRA compliant, which is a very strict compliance that we just breaking the equality of making a decision about a loan that you give out. And even though it is super predictive, you cannot use it. So that's one thing that you should consider. And another thing is just like I mentioned is that if you're from a semi-traditional industry and you really want to innovate, the system is usually has the limits, such as at my former company, they're building on a legacy system built by IBM like 20 years or 30 years ago. So you need to be creative and take into that consideration. And the third thing, what I mentioned is that you also have to take into other business into consideration, because in our space there is a interesting phenomenon called adverse selection, which means that the more responsive of the people, they are usually bad credit. They are usually very subprime, because for the prime customer, they have a higher negotiation power of the pricing, so they will usually receive so many offers. But if you think about the long term, if you're attracting a lot of bad credit people in your portfolio, what will be your impact in your long term? It will impact your lifetime customer value, and it will also in the long term impacting your business, like profit loss statement. So one suggestion in here is that talk to them how they think about it, and ask yourself and ask them, if you minimize or maximize certain goals, what will be the impact on your other business, negotiating with them, or set up some guardrail metrics that like definitely not to break, and it will really help you in the modeling process. So this is basically how that, in our example of how to build an initial model, but doesn't mean that like building model is just like finished. But sometimes for our former modeling team, I know for most of the time, strategy is driving the modeling team, but sometimes modeling team can also driving the business. So let's take a look at this example again, because later on when the test data come back, we found something very interesting. We found that for user group 2, even though they have a very high response rate, like 4% by calling, but if you look at the second column of not calling, they just naturally have high response rate. So it makes us think like, what does that mean? So later on, after some research, we discovered that just user group 2, although they have a higher response rate, it doesn't mean that they are very sensitive to the cause. So if you do a treatment of not call and calling, and the user group 2, they have lesser incremental value than the user group 1. Think about the third column. So we discovered this phenomenon, and we used a lift as our another target to build the models. Please take a look at the formula there. So later we changed the target to, if given a call, what is the probability to getting a loan minus the not call of the probability of getting a loan? But what is the benefit in here, and why does it change? Because just like I said, remember, we have to save costs because the calling is such expensive thing. But by this modeling method, we prioritize the people who are very sensitive to the cost. So this is a very popular methods that are, like casual machine learning, because what we build models before, such as a response model, is all about correlation. But this model bring another level. It's just like, what exactly drives the loan conversion rate? Is it just the call? So this is a very interesting finding, and the second step is always interesting to me. So I will let Michael to finish the rest of the steps.
Actually, I'll pass this. I think
Yeah.
I want to leave enough time for
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
So maybe just answer that question.
Okay.
This is yours, right?
This is
Oh,
yours.
this is mine. Oh, okay, okay. We're almost at the end. I'll try to be short. I don't want to keep myself between you and your lunch. And I want to leave enough time for questions. So the last question is selling your people and how, or selling the model to, and how exactly do you do that? Um, the first thing is to involve them from the beginning. So I would involve the stakeholders from the beginning, understand what they might be looking for and what they might be their concerns might be, and try to address them as soon as possible in the process. I would gain as many allies in the process as well, and ask some of your colleagues about what they think might be helpful for selling it. And then also, as we mentioned before, try to make it easy for the approver. Try to give them sort of an idea that they or sort of that they couldn't turn down. Like like for example, propose a test and understand how it would help them with their business and mitigate the risks that there might be. So I want to make sure we leave enough time for questions, because I'm guessing this topic might have some questions to it.